Hey everyone, hope you're all having an amazing day. Today I've got a story that will completely change the way you think about leadership. Imagine running a successful company convinced that everything is running smoothly, until you step into one of your own stores undercover and witness something that shakes you to the core. What would you do? Would you ignore it or would you take action? This CEO faced that exact moment, and what happens next is a powerful lesson in responsibility, accountability, and real leadership. Stick around, because this is a story you won't want to miss. Benjamin Carter, the CEO of Vision Tech, had always prided himself on building a company that valued both its customers and employees. What started as a small electronics business had grown into a nationwide tech retail chain known for its cutting-edge products and exceptional service. Or at least, that's what Benjamin thought. Until the complaints started rolling in. Emails from frustrated customers, online reviews slamming poor service, and reports of employees slacking off painted a troubling picture. One store in particular, a flagship location in downtown Chicago, had become a hotspot for negative feedback. Customers described rude staff, unhelpful employees, and a complete lack of professionalism. Even worse, some complained about being ignored entirely when they needed assistance. At first, Benjamin's regional managers assured him that these were just a few isolated incidents, nothing to be concerned about. But the more he looked into it, the more he realized something was fundamentally wrong. Store performance had been declining for months, yet no one at the managerial level had taken real action. Instead, he kept hearing the same excuses. Customer expectations are unrealistic. Turnover is high. People don't want to work anymore. But Benjamin refused to accept that explanation. Vision Tech wasn't built on excuses. It was built on results. Then, one complaint hit a nerve. A longtime customer had shared an unsettling experience. They had witnessed an elderly woman being dismissed by an employee when she asked for help setting up her new tablet. The employee had barely acknowledged her before walking away. That single moment, the blatant disregard for a customer in need, was enough to push Benjamin into action. He wasn't going to sit behind his desk and rely on second-hand accounts any longer. He needed to see the truth for himself. So he made a bold decision. He would go undercover. Instead of showing up as the CEO, he would enter the store as Ben Lewis, a newly hired sales associate. No executive privileges, no corporate meetings, just him on the ground experiencing what his customers and employees faced daily. If there was a real problem in his company, he was going to find it. And once he did, he was going to fix it. Dressed in faded jeans, a plain polo shirt, and sneakers, Benjamin Carter walked into the downtown Vision Tech store as Ben Lewis, a new sales associate. His neatly styled hair had been swapped for a slightly unkempt look, and he wore a pair of thick-rimmed glasses to complete the disguise. As he stepped inside, he immediately noticed the lack of energy in the store. Employees loitered behind the counter, casually scrolling through their phones while customers wandered aimlessly, looking for assistance. There was no enthusiasm, no engagement, just disinterest and indifference. Benjamin approached the front desk where Megan Hayes, the store manager, stood, checking inventory on a tablet. She barely glanced up before handing him a name tag. "You're the new guy, right? Training's minimal, just shadow one of the senior associates. Ask if you have questions," she said flatly before walking off, clearly preoccupied. No welcome, no introductions, just a cold, dismissive start to his new role. Moments later, Josh Reynolds, a senior associate in his early 40s, strolled over. He exuded boredom and arrogance, making it clear that training a new hire was the last thing he wanted to do. "All right, listen up," Josh sighed, motioning for Benjamin to follow. "The less time you spend explaining products, the better. Customers think they know what they want anyway. Just point them to the display, let them figure it out." As Benjamin trailed behind Josh, he noticed another employee, Lena Kim, a younger associate in her early 20s, who was busy assisting a customer with a complex laptop setup. Unlike Josh, Lena was patient, attentive, and genuinely engaged. She smiled reassuringly at Benjamin when she caught him struggling to navigate the store's system. "Don't worry, I'll help you out when I can," she whispered. Benjamin was only a few minutes into his shift, but he could already see a stark contrast in work ethic. While some employees, like Josh, did the bare minimum, others, like Lena, actually cared. But with leadership like Megan's, it was no surprise why the culture had deteriorated. Something was clearly wrong. and Benjamin had just begun to uncover it. It didn't take long for Benjamin to witness firsthand just how broken the store's customer service had become. The first red flag came mid-morning when a woman in her 60s walked in, looking confused as she examined the display of smartphones. She hesitated near the counter before approaching Josh, who was leaning against a shelf, arms crossed. "Excuse me," she said politely. "I need help choosing a phone. I'm not very good with technology." Josh barely looked up from his phone, sighing dramatically. "Specs are on the cards, lady, just read them," he muttered, waving vaguely at the shelf. The woman's face fell. "I was hoping someone could explain which one would be easiest for me to use," she said, her voice laced with uncertainty. Josh scoffed. "Look, if you're not sure, just pick the one with the biggest screen. That's what most people your age go for." Benjamin clenched his jaw. He had built Vision Tech on the foundation of accessibility, on making technology easy and inclusive for all customers, regardless of age or experience. And yet here was one of his own employees, treating a customer like an inconvenience. Before Benjamin could step in, Lena swooped in with a warm smile. "I'd be happy to help," she said kindly, stepping between Josh and the customer. She took the time to explain the features, even adjusting the screen brightness and enlarging the font size to show how the settings could be personalized. The woman's tense posture relaxed, and after a few minutes, she thanked Lena profusely. Josh, meanwhile, leaned toward Benjamin, shaking his head. "Total waste of time," he muttered. "Old customers like that, they ask a million questions and never buy the expensive stuff. Might as well not bother." Benjamin inhaled deeply, forcing himself to stay calm. He wanted to rip off his disguise and fire Josh on the spot, but he knew that exposing himself too soon wouldn't fix the deeper issues in the store. The second incident happened just an hour later, when a man in a wheelchair, Ethan Miller, entered the store, holding a tablet with a cracked screen. He rolled up to the counter where Josh stood, but Josh immediately turned away, pretending to be busy. "I need some help with my tablet," Ethan said, his voice polite but hesitant. Josh didn't even look at him. "Repairs take a week. You should have bought the insurance," he said dismissively. Ethan's face fell, and for a moment he looked like he might leave. But then, once again, Lena stepped in. "Let me take a look," she said warmly. "Even if it's out of warranty, we can see if there's something we can do." Ethan's relief was palpable, but Benjamin's anger was boiling. How many customers had walked out because of this treatment? He had seen enough. This wasn't just bad service, this was a complete failure of leadership, and it was time for things to change. The moment that pushed Benjamin over the edge came in the early afternoon when a father and his young son entered the store. The father, a middle-aged man with graying hair, carefully wheeled his son, who had cerebral palsy, toward the accessories section. The boy, no older than 10, had excitement in his eyes as he clutched a well-worn gaming console in his lap. His father leaned down and spoke softly, pointing toward the display of headsets and controllers. Benjamin, still under cover, watched from a distance, sensing that this interaction would be important. The father approached the counter where Josh was standing. "Excuse me," he said. "My son's been saving up for a gaming headset. He loves playing with his friends online, but his old one broke. Can you help us find one that's comfortable for him?" Josh barely looked up from his phone. He exhaled loudly, clearly irritated. "Headsets are over there," he said flatly, jerking his thumb toward the wall. "Just look at the tags." The father hesitated. "I was hoping you could help us choose one that's lightweight and easy for him to use. He has trouble with the heavier models." Josh rolled his eyes and muttered under his breath, "Unbelievable," before turning away. Benjamin felt his blood boil. It wasn't just rude, it was inhumane. The boy, who had been smiling moments earlier, shrunk back in his chair, his excitement dimming. His father clenched his jaw but remained calm. "Never mind," he said quietly, gripping the wheelchair handles as if preparing to leave. Before they could turn away, Lena stepped in. "Hi there," she said brightly, kneeling to meet the boy's gaze. "That's a really cool console you have. What kind of games do you like to play?" The boy's face lit up again. "Racing games," he said enthusiastically, "and I like adventure games too." Lena nodded thoughtfully. "All right, then we need to find you a headset that's comfy for long gaming sessions. Let's check out a few options together." She guided them to the display, taking her time to explain the different models. even letting the boy feel the weight of each headset to find one that worked best for him. Benjamin watched as the boy's joy returned, his father's tense shoulders relaxing, but his anger toward Josh only grew. How many times had customers like this been ignored, dismissed, or made to feel like an inconvenience? When the father went to pay, Josh leaned toward Benjamin and scoffed. "See what I mean? Waste of time. They bought the cheapest one. That's why I don't bother." It was it, the last straw. Benjamin took a deep breath, barely containing his fury. He had seen enough. This wasn't just poor customer service. This was a toxic culture, festering under the leadership of people who didn't care. As the father and son left, smiling and thanking Lena for her kindness, Benjamin knew exactly what he needed to do next. The undercover act was over. It was time to take back control. The moment the father and son left the store, Benjamin knew he could no longer stay silent. His disguise had served its purpose. He had seen firsthand how customers were treated, how toxic behavior was overlooked, and how employees like Lena were left to carry the weight of the entire store. It was time to confront the problem at its root. He approached Josh, who was once again leaning against the counter, scrolling through his phone as if nothing had happened. "Hey," Benjamin said in a neutral tone, keeping his anger in check. "Why didn't you help them?" Josh barely looked up. "What's the point? They weren't going to spend big. Besides, the kid wasn't my problem." Benjamin stared at him, struggling to contain his frustration. "Your problem," he repeated, his voice dangerously calm. "A customer needed help. That's your job, isn't it?" Josh finally looked up, his expression one of annoyed indifference. "Look, man, you're new. You'll get it eventually. You waste time on customers who don't buy the expensive stuff and management starts looking at your numbers, so why bother?" Before Benjamin could respond, Clara, the store manager, walked over. "What's going on?" she asked, glancing between them. Benjamin turned to her, choosing his words carefully. "I've noticed that Josh doesn't seem too interested in helping customers. Is that normal around here?" Clara sighed, already looking exasperated. "Josh has been here for years. He knows how things work. Customers can figure things out on their own. And honestly, we have sales targets to hit. We don't have time to hold people's hands." That response told Benjamin everything he needed to know. The problem wasn't just Josh's attitude. It was a store-wide culture that prioritized profits over people. Employees had been trained to see customers as numbers, not individuals. The worst part? Leadership encourages this behavior. He took a deep breath. His cover was about to be blown, but that was fine. "You don't have time to hold people's hands," he repeated, staring directly at Clara. "Tell me, do you think that boy in the wheelchair felt welcome here today?" Clara hesitated, clearly caught off guard. Josh rolled his eyes, muttering something under his breath. Benjamin had heard enough. Tomorrow, everything was going to change. The next morning, Benjamin Hayes walked into the store, but this time he wasn't wearing his trainee name tag. Gone were the casual clothes meant to help him blend in. He had returned in his usual professional attire, exuding the presence of the CEO of Nexus Tech. The moment he stepped through the doors, a wave of confusion and recognition spread through the employees. Lena's eyes widened in shock, Josh froze mid-scroll on his phone, and Clara visibly paled. It was clear that no one had expected the quiet new hire to be the man who ran the company. Benjamin didn't waste time. He called for a store-wide meeting, gathering every employee at the center of the sales floor. The tension was thick, the silence heavy. Clara, clearly unsettled, tried to speak first. "Mr. Hayes, we had no idea you were coming today. If you had let us know, we could have—" Benjamin held up a hand, silencing her. "That's exactly why I didn't announce my visit," he said, his voice calm but firm. "I needed to see for myself what was happening here. And what I found," his sharp gaze swept across the staff before settling on Josh, "I found a store that's forgotten the very foundation of what this company stands for." Josh shifted uncomfortably, but Benjamin wasn't done. "I watched as customers were ignored, dismissed, and treated like inconveniences rather than valued guests. I watched an employee, one of your best, carry this store on her shoulders while others did the bare minimum. And I watched as a young boy in a wheelchair was made to feel like he didn't matter." His voice hardened. "That is unacceptable." A heavy silence filled the store. Some employees looked down, ashamed, while others nodded subtly in agreement. Benjamin turned to Clara. As store manager, you set the tone here, and from what I saw, your focus has been on sales numbers at the cost of customer experience. That ends today. He then shifted his attention to Josh. And as for you, he said coldly, your blatant disregard for customers, your laziness, and your complete lack of empathy have no place in this company. You're fired, effective immediately. Josh's face went red. You're seriously firing me just because I didn't want to waste time on... You're being fired, Benjamin interrupted, because you don't represent this company's values. Security escorted Josh out as the remaining employees stood in stunned silence. Finally, Benjamin turned to the team. This isn't just about one bad employee. It's about fixing this store from the ground up, and that starts now. Lena, standing nearby, exhaled in relief. The culture that had been dragging the store down was finally about to change. With Josh gone and the tension still lingering in the air, Benjamin Hayes knew that firing one toxic employee wouldn't be enough to fix the store. This was about more than just one individual. It was about reshaping the entire workplace culture. He turned to face the remaining employees, their expressions ranging from uncertainty to quiet anticipation. I know trust isn't built in a day, he said, but change starts now. The first order of business was addressing leadership. Benjamin looked at Clara, the store manager. Clara, I need you to step up, he said firmly. Leadership isn't about pushing numbers, it's about supporting your team. Clara swallowed hard, nodding. She knew she had been too focused on sales quotas, and now, under the CEO's direct scrutiny, she had no choice but to change. Benjamin made it clear if she couldn't adjust her leadership style to reflect the company's core values, she wouldn't remain in her position. Next, he turned to Lena, the one employee who had consistently shown integrity and dedication. Lena, you've proven that you care about the customers and the people you work with. Effective immediately, I'm promoting you to assistant manager. A small gasp rippled through the group, and Lena's eyes widened in shock. Me? She asked. Benjamin nodded. You deserve it. And this store needs leadership that leads by example. Then Benjamin addressed customer service standards. He rolled out an emergency training session to reset expectations for how customers should be treated. Every employee would go through a refresher course in engagement, accessibility, and professionalism. No more ignoring customers. No more dismissive behavior. Employees were now required to approach and assist every guest with genuine effort, just like Lena had been doing all along. Beyond customer service, Benjamin also implemented structural changes. Employees would now have scheduled check-ins where they could share concerns without fear of backlash. An anonymous feedback system was put in place so workers could report toxic behavior and unfair treatment directly to corporations. This way, future issues wouldn't fester in silence. To improve the work environment, Benjamin ordered an immediate restructure of scheduling policies. No more understaffing or pushing one employee to carry the weight of three. He made sure to hire additional support staff to prevent burnout, ensuring everyone had a fair workload. As the meeting ended, the employees exchanged glances, still trying to process what had just happened. Some seemed hopeful, others skeptical. But for the first time in a long time, change didn't just feel like an empty promise. It felt real. And as Benjamin walked through the store, watching as Lena and Clara began implementing the first steps of the transformation, he felt something shift. This store was finally heading in the right direction. Benjamin Hayes knew that fixing one store was just the beginning. What he had uncovered at this location, neglect, poor leadership, and a culture that placed profits over people, wasn't an isolated incident. If it had happened here, it was happening elsewhere, and it was time to rebuild the entire company from the ground up. His first major reform was company-wide leadership training. Every manager across all stores would undergo an intensive training program focused on customer service, leadership accountability, and workplace ethics. The goal was simple. Leaders needed to lead, not just enforce policies. Any manager who failed to meet these new standards would be replaced. Benjamin made it clear there was no room for toxic leadership at Infinity Tech. Next, he tackled employee well-being. Stores had been operating under stressful, understaffed conditions. leading to burnout and low morale. To address this, Benjamin hired additional staff across all locations, ensuring that employees weren't stretched to their breaking points. Work schedules were revised, offering fairer shifts and mandatory break times, so employees could actually perform at their best without sacrificing their mental and physical health. A key part of these reforms was establishing direct communication between employees and corporate leadership. Benjamin introduced a new internal reporting system that allowed employees to provide anonymous feedback about their work environment. Unlike before, these reports would not be buried or ignored. They would go straight to corporate leadership, including Benjamin himself. This system ensured that employees always had a voice and could report mistreatment without fear of retaliation. Beyond internal changes, Benjamin also overhauled the customer experience. He reinforced a new standard of service across all stores. Every customer should feel valued, heard, and respected. Employees were retrained in engagement strategies, accessibility support, and product knowledge, ensuring that no customer, regardless of their background or abilities, was ever overlooked again. As months passed, the results were undeniable. Customer satisfaction improved, employee turnover rates dropped, and store productivity increased. The toxic culture that had once festered within Infinity Tech was being replaced by one of accountability, fairness, and true leadership. Benjamin had nearly lost sight of what made his company great, but now he had set it on a course for lasting success, one where people always came first. Months after implementing company-wide reforms, Benjamin Hayes walked into an Infinity Tech store. This time not as an undercover trainee, but as the CEO. The atmosphere was different. The store, which had once felt cold and unwelcoming, now hummed with positive energy and teamwork. Employees moved with purpose, assisting customers with genuine engagement rather than forced politeness. The stress that once weighed them down was gone, replaced with confidence and pride in their work. As he observed, Benjamin saw familiar faces. Lisa Kim, the once overlooked employee, was now an assistant manager, guiding newer associates with ease. She exuded leadership and warmth, stepping into a role she had unknowingly been preparing for all along. Meanwhile, employees like Sam, a former cashier who had been burned out and disengaged, were now thriving. The new policies ensured fair workloads, proper training, and a support system that encouraged growth rather than exhaustion. Then the doors opened, and in rolled Ethan Miller, the disabled customer who had once been ignored. This time, there was no hesitation. Several employees greeted him with smiles. Lisa personally stepped forward, offering assistance without making him feel like an afterthought. Ethan smiled, visibly more comfortable than he had been during his first visit. As he checked out, he turned to Benjamin and said, "I almost didn't come back here, but now I feel like I actually matter." Benjamin felt a deep sense of pride. This was the change he had fought for. Not just numbers on a report, not just increased sales, but real people feeling valued, both employees and customers. Infinity Tech was no longer just another retail store. It was a place where people wanted to work, where customers felt welcome, and where respect wasn't just a policy, it was the foundation. As Benjamin left the store, he glanced back one last time. This was the company he had envisioned when he first started Infinity Tech, and now he had finally brought it back to life. The story of Benjamin Hayes' undercover journey at Infinity Tech highlights a powerful lesson in leadership, accountability, and the importance of company culture. As a CEO, Benjamin believed his company was thriving until he stepped into the daily reality of his employees and customers. What he found was a toxic work environment, a lack of proper customer care, and a culture that rewarded complacency over compassion. The biggest takeaway from his experience? Leadership is not about sitting in an office. It's about staying connected to the people who make the company run. Policies and reports may tell one side of the story, but the true measure of a company lies in how employees are treated and how customers feel when they walk through the doors. By taking action, removing toxic influences, and empowering hardworking employees, Benjamin transformed Infinity Tech into more than just a business. It became a place where both customers and employees felt valued. His journey proves that real leadership isn't just about profits or efficiency. It's about respect, empathy, and the willingness to fix what's broken. Ultimately, the success of any company comes down to this: When you take care of your people, they take care of your business.